Good morning and welcome to today's webinar series from Lean Focus. The topic for today's webinar is entitled Grow Top Line and Margin by Excellence in Value Selling. I am pleased to introduce you here in a minute to our panelist and presenter, Dr. Christian Artmann, who is a Vice President in Lean Focus's European consulting practice. A little bit of logistics announcements this morning before we get started. This webinar will be recorded and will be made available upon the conclusion of today's webinar and can be downloaded and viewed on your own time schedule. Additionally, there are handouts that are in the control panel that you can download that contain information about Lean Focus, our consulting practice, and our toolbox, of which Christian will cover one particular tool called Value Selling in our toolbox today. There will be opportunity for questions and answers at the end of today's webinar, and the way to ask or pose a question to Christian is to type in your question, and then I will read those questions at the end of the session as the moderator and have Christian respond to your questions. So we ask that this presentation not be shared with anyone outside of this call for standard proprietary information. And without further ado, I'll let Christian introduce himself. Christian?
Yeah. Maybe quickly in a summary, I've been in practice as a sales manager, a salesperson and sales manager, and managing director for about 25 years. And that's a pleasure after 25 years of real hands-on work to do a PhD on the implementation of value selling. And that's basically today's reason which I would like to reflect on. And from that research, we have taken really, I would say, the essence plus the practical experience in the implementation cases we had in the recent 2 years. So I would like to share with you the real-on experience on how to implement value selling. Maybe a few words about Lean Focus.
So this is today's agenda. So I will cover a quick introduction on Lean Focus. Christian will cover the topic of value selling, why value selling is important to an organization, what is value selling more deeply in terms of its content, description, and definitions. And then we have some case studies prepared from actual client work that highlights the value and impact that value selling can have in an organization. And then we're going to leave you with some how-to guides, an implementation for your business, and a quick check to see what the level of maturity is for your company with regards to value selling. So a little bit about Lean Focus, who we are as a company. So we are a management consultancy and talent placement firm that helps clients build high performance cultures. What that means is companies that are able to drive sustained profitable growth year over year, utilizing a standard business system and way of thinking and operating their companies. And there's three parts that makes that high performance culture actually operate effectively. It takes driven leaders, no surprise here, leaders that are wired with the DNA and with the thinking and behaviors required to drive this high performance culture year after year. And of course, they are experienced in the various tools required to do so. Then there's a set of true north guiding principles. You think of these as like ways of working that individuals use as true north sort of guides to outline the effort in terms of continuous improvement and the changes being made in the organization. And then proven systems, of which value selling is one particular tool in a host of tools that fit inside of broader systems in an organization to drive results. Value selling particularly fits into what we will call the growth system, which Christian will explain here in a little bit, where it actually fits into the overall system. So when you put these things together, it's amazing what an organization can accomplish in terms of delivering results year after year by having these three pillars of your culture intact and working effectively. So we've worked in quite a few industries and across many different client types, as you can see represented by this client slide here, and this isn't in any way exhaustive. So the takeaway here for this slide is that the high performance culture and the way of operating a business in that manner applies to any industry and to any company, regardless of whether you manufacture a product or you're a service organization, or you have discrete manufacturing or continuous manufacturing, high volume, low mix, lean thinking or lean principles, continuous improvement, the power of continuous improvement, and creating a problem solving culture applies to any company in the world. And that's the message that we want you to take away from this slide. So now I'll turn it over to Christian and he'll explain how value selling, today's topic, fits into our business system approach.
Perfect. As you can see, the growth system, that is the growth of the company, and it is maybe now also my connecting point. I said I prepared or created PhD work after 25 years of real experience. And on the next page, I summarize the top 3 learnings from that, which I think are truly, truly relevant. I think first of all, if you compare companies, even good performing companies, those who do run value selling have an average 2% more EBIT. On the next page, as a summary. So it also means that those companies, can you switch to the next page, Damon? One more page. Yeah. So 2%, that is proven evidence that those companies who do value selling have 2% more EBIT. It is a lot. Second, it's absolutely important in this case that when you do an implementation, it has to be kept vital. I've seen many companies who said that they use value selling and have nice presentations in terms of PowerPoints, but it's not vital. It doesn't live inside the organization, and we have tools to measure that, how lively a system is. The third is extremely set that fits to the other thing, top level commitment. To put it in a context, when it has been implemented in my company, the CEO or the vice CEO of the company spent 4 days with us implementing value selling. So it was not given to someone to do a training here, a training there. So together with, I would say, an advisor and himself, he really dedicated 4 days of implementation work. And that sends a message to the organization. And it's also proven by the research which I did, part of my PhD work, if the top level management doesn't back up the implementation of value selling, it will fail. It's a waste of money. So I think having these 3 things in mind, maybe the next question on the next page really is, well, what is value selling now? On the next page, I try to basically put some highlights of what is value selling. First of all, it is really a lean procedure. I mean, that sounds, I would say, strange to some, at least I can speak for Europe only, for a lot of Europeans, that sales is a systematic work. When I go out and do implementation work, my experience is quite often that they say, well, selling is an art, it's all about relationship, it's about how you can deal with people. I say, no, to be very frank, it's not. Honestly, if someone goes to sales, I expect that this person can deal with people and has some, I would say, cultural skills. It's like a consultant can do calculations and a bookkeeper can do bookkeeping. But what makes a good salesperson is the systematic approach to it and the professional attitude. He's not the artist who does a good painting here and there. It's a professional who does deliver results day in, day out on a high level. And the third thing, which came from a lot of discussions with a large, I would say, the chemical company, was another big learning, which means those companies who do good value selling keep learning from every sales contact. So every time you perform a sales contact, you sit back for yourself and for the organization. What is our learning from it and how can we improve next time? In my implementation work, I at the beginning sometimes see people who said, "Hey, Christian, I'm in this business for 25 years. I know everything, and I don't need to learn anything anymore." Well, that attitude wouldn't work in lean. You always improve, and you have to be learning also within the sales teams. It might sound simple, but it is normally one of the fundamental change we need to implement when we do value selling installations. So moving from that on, what is the key essence of value selling? What does it make difference from the other ones? Let me put into a nutshell. When I sent over one of my, I would say, very good salespeople to the British water companies, the day after he returned, I got a phone call from the CEO of the water company, telling Christian, can you sell Michael over again? It was such a great meeting. We would like to meet him again, and they're willing to pay for it. That means when customers perceive even the sales conversations you do as value for the business, then you start value selling. Then the people understand that the person you are sending with the skills and preparations the person has does create value for your customer. That means every time we engage with our customers, even in pre-sales, we create value. That also means that the person or the team which is going needs to be able to be a consultant. I mean, really a consultant to the customer even before buying. At the end, of course, our solution needs to help our customers. That is more or less the obvious. So the second bullet point in most cases is the obvious. And the third is always, I would say, in many cases, obvious to have value with the customers while we work with them. But let me repeat my narrative, which I made for my colleague Michael. In that moment, when the customer perceives the conversation with you as value for its business, then you are in value selling mode. There's a lot to do behind. I mean, it doesn't come overnight. There are a lot of things which you really have to prepare to get organized for that. And I would like to give on the next page a few highlights on the things which you need to prepare prior to driving that. So I've put together, I think, nine points, and would like to spend some time on this page. Let's go to the green thing first. Develop, localize, and revitalize tools and methods to analyze and quantify the value for the customer. I mean, when I work with even engineering companies which sell machinery and heavy equipment, they have a very hard time to calculate the ROI of their own tool for the customer. For example, if you sell something which does save energy, especially now in Europe, I mean, saving energy is a true point. And just I think over Christmas, we worked together with one company and figured out that their solution can reduce energy consumption by 3%. They said, well, Christian, it's a minor point. Came February, and suddenly 3% energy reduction is a major selling point. So you need to be able to calculate the value of your business for the customer. That is sometimes tricky, but it is part of the work we do together with our clients. Second point is to systemize the way you are playing it now. So now you have the story. Now you have to systematically play this game with your customer at all phases. So long before the customer thinks about buying something or even having a need, you need to pitch your point with a customer in a systematic process. And here, of course, sales and marketing go together. Sometimes when we, I would say, check out companies, they do it on, I would say, accidental cases. It's never 0 or 1. But what is normally missing is a systematic approach to that. And that sets a lean, value selling company aside from the other ones. Another little side story is this use of player maps. I don't know if you are used to what is called a player map, which means to figure out who in our customer audience is relevant for us. In many cases, actually in too many cases, when we do the checkup, they speak with maybe the buyer or the key project leader in case of, for example, engineering projects. But they don't know the boss of this guy, they don't know the boss of the maintenance, they don't know the guy who runs the factory at the end, and they don't know the quality manager of the company. So when it comes to a decision, On our side, we know our team, but on the customer side, there's normally a big group of people deciding on our investments. And we need to know all of them. I mean, all of them, and somehow have contact with them. Of course, we can't have tight contact with all of them, but we need to know what is their thinking, what are their pain points. And depending on that knowledge, we can either spin our offer, ask more and better questions, and then shape also our negotiation at the end. When we do the analysis of companies in terms of value selling, we try to understand how good is their player map. And too often, the player map is weak. So the first improvement point to drive up revenue and margin is improve the contacts left and right of your key buyer. That has the implication, and now are coming to the connection of value selling in the entire organization. I mean, value selling is not just the job of the salesperson. For example, preparing the right ROI stories. So look at the green box. You probably need someone in R&D, product management, QA, lots of people, maybe in the sales and service team, who can contribute with numbers and facts. So value selling is not only something for the sales team, it's a philosophy for the entire company. We also do training, for example, for product managers to be able to support value selling, because they need to build, I keep repeating, the ROI calculator for the salesperson. It's very important. That's why when you are going to implement value selling, it is very important to first of all inform the entire organization, but also to involve the entire organization in the implementation of it. It's very, very important. Typically, it's forgotten about this. The next, of course, is, maybe it sounds simple, it's social media. I mean, if you're going to do value selling, you sell also the skills and competences of human beings. And a quick check we normally do even before we go to a client is we check out the presence of the key people, salespeople and management people on LinkedIn. I mean, like our customers would do. If you go to a customer, you have a meeting, so prior to the meeting, normally you would check out on LinkedIn or another social media account the skill set of your counterpart. And if your counterpart is not present on the social media and with the wrong profile, so it doesn't come across as competency, well, you might don't trust this person for this call from the very beginning. So this person is a very bad start just from the very first point. So that means value selling also means shaping your social media account. I mean, this is now social selling. People need to understand that the world has changed, and maybe you do a check, maybe check out within your company, what is the, I would say, appearance to the outer world of the people who are going to present your company. Would you buy from that gentleman or that lady? Please do a check. We normally have a problem there and have a first quick win. Now that leads to the next one, which is this orange, to build up the competency perception. And that is a key word, competency perception. It means that you have to have the competency, yes, but also the other people need to perceive that. And normally the key point is to know the application and the commercial impact. That reads so simple, but believe me, in our projects, when we really drill deep with our salespeople and the organization, in many cases, the application competency is not as deep as required. So it means that the people which are going to sell need to understand the customer and the customer of our customer. So 2 steps ahead. We need to know what will drive our customer in the future. What makes a good factory of our customer a better factory? We need to know that. We need to know the numbers, the benchmarks, and everything. And investing into application competency can never be good, can never be enough. What we normally see is that people speak a lot about, and maybe typical German, typical European thing, is too much about technicalities, details here, details left. What we do then normally in kind of implementation is we go through every single element of the machine, for example, and figure out why it's designed that way, what is a customer benefit from that, and how can we integrate this into our sales process. That means when would we have to ask the critical question, which at the end leads to the value of our product? So what kind of preparation tools do we need to showcase the value within his application? That sounds easy. Maybe it is easy. In many cases, which we perceive, it is a major game changer to do that, and it does take time to implement. This automatically leads to the blue thing, a systematic funnel management. I mean, most people have CRM systems and all kinds of funny stuff. But if you then try to understand how is the use of the CRM system and how is the sales funnel organized, for example, what are the activities before an RFQ comes into our house? Do they really play pretty strong on a vital and well-balanced funnel at all phases? I mean, very often we see quite a good, I would say, CRM use and funnel use after the RFQ has reached the house. Then maybe they have kind of an incoming funnel, a selection process, prioritization, and then they handle it through. But I think you are also in this B2B world. I mean, I've never ever seen a neutral RFQ. All the RFQs I had in my hand had been written by someone, hopefully by the impact or the influence of our salespeople prior in this pre-sales phase, or when we read through it closely, they have been impacted by other people, competition, for example. And I may imagine you are a salesperson, so you are an engineer at your customer site. Now you have to create an RFQ to be sent out to other people, to other companies, to providers. You either take what you have and you modify, or you maybe have a colleague that helps you, or maybe someone, and in most cases, maybe the competition, give this gentleman or this lady a hint what could be a good feature that you should put into this RFQ. So if your people would analyze an RFQ coming in, most of the time you can judge, has this RFQ been influenced by someone else? And if so, well, then maybe our competency perception is not that great, because obviously our customer has not spoken with us before he sent us the RFQ. So the ambition of value selling is to position our entire company and our salespeople prior to RFQ. And therefore, the sales funnel focus, when we do the implementation, is pretty much pre-RFQ focus. Afterwards, yes, of course, it's still important, but you won't be able to change the game anymore because the game has been played. That also now comes to the last point on this page, which is continuous training. I mean, many times when we talk with customers, well, we had training a year ago, and the training is here and there ago. Well, value selling is constant training. And I can report from one company, it's also a case study to come. We do with this company now every 6 weeks a retraining. Of course, always different, always advancing, and we always use real cases. So every 6 weeks, we train the entire sales team, half a day. This is highly effective, and the company is now really moving forward. So they played a lot of training games, and they played this, what we would call ROI game, based on energy. I mean, it seems to work greatly. And of course, now we come to the upper left. That is a change of beliefs. In the companies which we work on and which now really are successful with this value selling, the fundamental beliefs on sales and sales management has changed. It's much more about creating value for the customer than selling a technique or a technology. It has really worked out nicely. So, as a consequence, there are many aspects to consider when you do value selling, and let's highlight this on the next page now with 2 case studies. One case study is a company where I've been executive for quite a while. I can't tell the name, but on the next page, I would say the company, can you move to the next page, Damon? Thanks. Of course, the company was already a market leader. It was a very good company, no reason to be negative. Portfolio was good, everything good, training status was good. The challenge now was that we want to go to Eastern Europe. We would like to expand our geographical markets, which means our value stories, tools, and methods had not been ready for these markets. And of course, our scalability was not as we needed. So, what was our self-reflection? We need to improve all the systematics of our sales approach in terms of commercial value for our customers within the specific Eastern European situation. That sentence sounds very simple, very easy. In fact, it was not. It was a lot of effort, first of all, to understand the different drivers of commercial value in Eastern Europe, and every country was different. And then to transfer that into a systematic adaptation of our sales process. Connecting back to what I said about pre-sales, we need to have established different pre-sales procedures in every single country and follow them up. So the initiative really had been threefold. First of all, build a process and a structure. So install the right human beings, give them the right tools at their hand to maintain and localize the customer value qualification. I spoke about that we have to do an ROI calculation for our customers. Of course, now the ROI calculation in this water business was different by market. So that had to be prepared. It was a lot of work, but at the end it paid out nicely. It also means that we have to train the people on how to use that stuff. It doesn't make sense to give people tools, let's say a hammer, and don't train them how to use a hammer. So we spend a lot of time and energy on people on how to use a hammer, and also retraining. What people normally forget is training, retrain, audit. Training is a cycle. Train, audit, experience, retrain, improve the training material, continue and improve. It's a cycle. And we spend a lot of time doing that. And I'll not repeat myself. Of course, within that, we had to spend a lot of energy on our people to really focus sales and marketing execution on the pre-sales phase. Because too many salespeople think about, well, there's an RFQ, let's work on the RFQ. Especially when you're a new entry in a market that is too late. Because then you get only the RFQs which no one else wants, or you're number 3rd or number 4 for the price comparison only. So our effort was really to push all the 2 bullet points above on the pre-sales phase. So what was the result out of that? I mean, obviously we had been very successful. And I would say if you now travel to Eastern Europe, you would see the installations from that company process every single water plant everywhere in the company. So it was very successful, but it was a lot of painful and detailed work. The other thing, the other case study I bring to you is very different. One page back, please. Yes. Okay, this one. It's an automotive supplier, so it's machining for automotive. It was it is still a local player with very good technical know-how, very well grounded. Everything is fine. Everything is okay. It is well suited portfolio fitting to the target segments. I can't say exactly which segment it is, but it's interior design for automotive. Training status of the people is good. Everything is fine. Unfortunately, the company had some issues. To be very frank, financial crisis. And the issue was a low closing rate. For some reasons, they have not been able or had not been able to go over the last mile, the lost on the last mile. So then we sit down with the management. We went through our analysis tools and checkboxes, and it turned out that they have an issue on how to systematically calculate the commercial value. This was a company I mentioned with the energy thing. For example, they just kept talking even in the very last round of negotiations about 2 features of their product. And they have not been able to transfer the features of their solution into commercial value, and they had not been able to communicate it appropriately in the negotiation phase towards the end of the deal phase. Which means we spent a lot of time with them to do a quantification. Ad hoc means we had only 3 weeks, because otherwise the business class would have been too big. So we spent a lot of time rapidly going over each and every machine, figuring out what does this machine do in comparison to competition, and what are the small little advances you have in terms of commercial value. I mean, every single piece at only a dime, a couple of percentages. But if you add all the small points up, the machines they make are really, really advantageous. Then what we did, we worked out with them the players maps. So for each of the hot projects, we really asked them to identify all players.
Looks like we're having a technical difficulty here. Christian, are you there? Okay, so that's why we always have a backup. So I'm going to take it over from the implementation and the quick check step of the value selling process. So a very busy slide, so not meant to cover all aspects of this slide, but I like to think of this as the way you go about doing a value selling installation in a company. We call this the master map, and this can be customized based on the particular client solution. So Christian mentioned a couple different industries. One was environmental or water quality, and the other was automotive. So these detailed steps within the phases may be quite different based on the industry needs going on within that particular client situation. But the overall steps at the top in terms of the phases are pretty much the same. So there's a planning phase where you really, I think of this as like defining the problem, where you're trying to understand what the issues are in this particular client situation. So Christian mentioned a client that was in a financial crisis mode, which obviously predictates how you're going to think about this in terms of timing and priority. So there's some consideration factors in terms of the sense of urgency that you would need to have. And then I would say creating a baseline for what winning looks like. So assessing the sales funnel in that previous example where we talked about closing rates. When you look at the overall sales funnel and you notice that everything is flowing and then we get to the end and we have a low close rate. So maybe that's the largest commercial problem that needs to be solved via value selling. And then you determine which part of the value selling process needs to be installed to overcome that particular metric and make a improvement. There's a high degree of change management that goes into value selling, not unlike any other tool that you have to implement in a company. So it's about rallying change, creating the organization, making sure that they're ready for that change, communicating what all of these tools are about and where we're going in terms of the value selling rollout. So having an action plan, having a project champion, if you will, or a value selling champion is a good best practice in the organization so that the knowledge and subject matter expertise is actually owned by somebody in the commercial organization as within the client versus us as an outside firm. So they needs to make sure that it's part of how they run their business going forward.
Oh,
then Christian, you're back.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. I mean, 5G connection normally should be stable.
No
Don't ask me
worries.
why.
I started presenting this slide and I got all the way to the development phase of the master map. So if you want to pick it up from development to improvement,
Yes.
we're
Yeah.
good to go.
So that is basically here as it's the outcome of all our work is, I would call it a mosaic almost of things to be considered. And what we would normally do in the first phase of a project is to figure out where is the organization today. So in terms of planning, what does exist? And depending on what the current situation today is, we go for, well, one needs to be prepared because you cannot start value selling without a preparation. So, I mean, as simple as just some highlights from this page, you need to have a coalition for change. Of course, that means what I said before, value selling is something for the entire organization. That means to have everyone behind. Then comes development, which is kind of just doing the stuff with the first people, get the things going. And when these things start going in the organization, then you can do the what some people call the rollout into the entire organization. And then very important, and you need to tell this to the people at the very beginning, we are going to continuously improve the thing. So value says nothing you do once and then everyone is happy. It's a continuous improvement thing. What I put here in the middle is this interface local central. This is when we place a lot of effort on this interface local central. Because normally we talk about the company, you have the headquarter, wherever the headquarter is, and then you have the sales people on the ground. And usually there's a huge friction between the sales people on the ground and the guys in the ivory tower. I mean, I call it ivory tower. And therefore, we do spend a lot of energy and we have the right tools available to bridge that local central interface. It would mean, of course, there's a certain way on how to develop the sales content, the product presentations, the ROI calculations, and to keep them updated and to keep them, I would say, locally applicable. Another important thing is also the connection to the HR management, value selling and the HR management. I mean, imagine you are pushing out value selling as a way to do business. Maybe you have a good salesperson in Denmark. That is, by the way, a real case, a good salesperson in Denmark. Good results in a sense. But this person is not playing the game you want to play. He's not doing the value calculations for the customer. He's not updating the social media profiles. He's not focusing on pre-sales for whatever reason. Well, we fired this gentleman, even though the numbers have been good. People ask us, hey, why have you fired this gentleman? Well, he was not playing to our rules. And you can imagine what happens when we fired this gentleman. The next person came and was even more successful. Because a lot of what we saw are good numbers was the business growth of the market anyhow. And the person who worked systematically, this person really gained market share beyond the market growth. That means, first of all, you need to make sure that you only promote people which are willing to do a systematic approach. And we have also developed a social, or say, also a profiling measures to figure out if a human being is more on the systematic side or on the artist side. And in value selling, you would like to have people who are still creative, but who play to the system and inside the system. I sometimes explain this with an example in soccer. If you are a top soccer team, Champions League, yes, you have great players, but every player needs to play within the training system that has been organized for this team. He cannot play his own game. He can play within the rules given by the trainer. And that's why we think value selling does have a strong relation with HR management in terms of people selection, people promotion, and also people incentivation. It is very important to connect that. Of course, value selling needs to be tracked. I mean, that is obvious. Yes, you have to do tracking. That means, for example, what we currently do with another company, it's in electronics. we figure out how many of their products have sufficient sales material in terms of points of difference, value calculations, and so on. So do we have the right ammunition for our salespeople to go out? And we track that. So it comes on top of everything else. We need to have the right story in place, in the right language, of course. And also the question is about system support. For example, is there a system which enables or allows our salespeople to get the content? I mean, I can only speak for my clients. In many cases, it's even tricky and difficult to find the most actual technical data, to find the most actual value calculation. So if you do all of the above and you don't have the systems right, you fail. That's why I call it the mosaic. You need every single piece of it to make the picture. Of course, CRM people, well, in many cases, people claim they have CRM. When we do the checkup, many cases, CRM is kind of, I would say, a report generator, but it's not a sales support system, what it should be. So, of course, the CRM should have a certain level. Then, of course, sales management, which means performance tracking and so on. And what's also important, this is the last point which I like to mention on this page, is the systematic learning. Somehow what we found out, if you don't establish systematic learning via systems, on the long run, it is hard to really continuously improve value selling. So this is what we normally use as a kind of a guiding page to shape the specific solution for our customers. I would like to use a few seconds now on the next page, which is a self-assessment. And maybe after this meeting, you think about your organization and ask yourself 7 questions. If you would ask your customer, how would they grade your application competency of your company? Top score, medium score, maybe no clue. If you analyze the RFQs coming in, how many of the RFQs you get do you know before they came to your desk? So are based on prior awareness. That's normally a very good key indicator for value selling. Then you might take a very close look at the sales funnel. How is the balance between pre-sales, sales, and after sales? How vital is the sales funnel? If it's good, be happy. If the pre-sales funnel is weak, you will run into problems soon. Next question is, imagine now the salesperson is with a customer. How easy is it for him to showcase, to calculate the customer value? How can he do that? What are his tools? How visible is it? Maybe you check out the support material or the tools for your salespeople. Maybe next question for the critical projects, you just ask around on this project, how many human beings, I mean people, do we know at different ranks and functions around this project we are going for? Do we know only the project leader, the purchasing guy? Do we know all of them? And how good do we know them? It's normally a very good question to figure out how value selling is implemented. Then comes question number 6. If you look back to the salespeople you have or the customer interaction people, how good are they in really analyzing the customer needs? Do they know the application well enough to ask the specific questions which would lead to the value of your products? I mean, the real important questions. Would the customer invite this human being for a conversation about a potential solution? That's a question you can ask yourself. And 7, what tools and methods do we have at hand to quantify, to calculate as the customer value of our product? Do we have tools at all? So maybe with these 7 questions, maybe you can check out where you are on the implementation of value selling. Maybe you can do, and maybe you can discuss about this afterwards. So it would be great if you could do this with your organization. Yeah, and that's the last point I want to make. I think we have a couple of minutes left for questions.
Okay, Christian, I have several questions here. Are you ready?
I'm ready to go.
Okay, question 1. What does the sales leader standard work look like to help sustain a value selling culture?
I would say one key behavior is what I would call is co-travel. It means that the sales leader works with a salesperson, but not on their behalf. So a typical thing is when a sales manager travels with a salesperson or has a phone call together with a salesperson, he tries to run the show. And a good sales leader in value selling is just listening passively and being at the side, but let the salesperson run the show and afterwards provides this salesperson a systematic feedback. That sets the good leaders apart.
Okay, thank you. Question number 2. What if your product or service has several flaws? How do you overcome this during the sales process and value selling? So think like a quality
Okay.
issue with a product or.
I mean, if the has a clear flaw, well, maybe it's another problem. But the point is, we need to figure out, is this flaw relevant for my customer? Because it might be that what you perceive as a flaw is really not relevant for the customer. So if you do know the application, you go to those customers. That's why I'm pushing on pre-sales, where this issue is not that big. So that's why I think, especially when you have flaws, you need to focus on the pre-sales, target only those customers where you, I would say, weak points are not so relevant.
Okay. What is the typical timeline or timing to install a value selling process like what you shared on the map within a company?
Okay, let's assume the company is dedicated to do it. The preparation time, so from assessment to preparation time, would take 2 or 3 months. Then you might have the first rollout for another 3 months, and then you are already in the, I would say, implementation level, and you can move to sustain and improve. So after half a year, you should see impact on the street across the organization and then going from there.
Okay. How does one go about assessing their value selling maturity? Do you have a standard checklist that you use to assess value selling maturity in an organization?
Yeah, we have even a statistically proven method, which was basically, it's validated statistically. We go over the aspects which we have identified as are critical, not important, I mean critical for value selling, and we have defined scores, and based on an interview basis with the organization to figure out where the company is in a numerical basis, and we have a database to compare the values to. So it's the numbers and the benchmarks.
Thank you. What are the typical mistakes that you've seen being made with respect to value selling implementation in companies?
Yeah, I would say there are two major mistakes. The one is that they see this as a sales training thing. So they send a couple of people to a sales training, let's do value selling, and then they come back and they cannot implement anything. So it's seen as a sales only approach. And they don't understand what we just discussed, the entire mosaic of changes. Second is maybe they get over the hurdle of the mosaic and implemented it, but then they forget to maintain and to improve. So a good value selling company, after the implementation, if you go to the company 2 years later, the most thing have improved. So the ROI calculation has improved. The pre-sales has improved. The funnel logic has improved. Every element has improved. And we see too many companies where we also come for helping, which says we have value selling. Yes, I would say they are ruins. They are old buildings broken down and not maintained. It needs constantly maintain and update. And that's the second big mistake which you can make in the implementation of value selling.
Great. What comes first? So it's like a chicken or egg question. What comes first, installing sales funnel management as a process, or value selling?
This is an excellent question. It's a famous chicken eggs question. You are right. But I would still say, and now I speak from the experience in the restructuring case, get the sales funnel in first. So numbers first.
Good.
Transparency first. Try to establish what your logic of a sales process is. So what we normally do in these companies, we basically, it doesn't take long. It's 1 or 2 days, maybe 3 days longest. We sit down and say, how should your sales process look from the very beginning? And I say from the shower. So a salesman under the shower has to think how to increase his revenue. What's the first step he's doing? And build the step from this very first step, I call it the shower date, to the closing date. And then you try to figure out where your organization stands and try to get numbers in. And then from that, you establish this value selling step by step.
Okay, next question. Every customer may see differently what value they find in the same service or product. How do you account for this variation?
That is an excellent point. And this is why I said in the point before, how good is the customer or the salesperson in the needs analysis? That is exactly the point. So you need to have the tools and I would say the hammer in your basket. But it doesn't mean every problem is a nail. But a good sales craftsman, he has a lot of tools in his box. He knows ROI, he knows the different value facets, he knows the application differences he's going after. And depending on that, he's able to do for every company or for every customer a very specific needs analysis. And then from his basket of tools, ROI tools and all other tools, he selects only those which are relevant for this application and even for that human being in front of him. To illustrate this, if you figure out that for certain projects, one person is in charge of the initial investment and the other person is in charge for the ongoing maintenance, of course, you need to understand the specific needs of these two people very different. And then, of course, you pitch your offer different to these two people. At the end, in the final written proposal, you might have to compose it somehow. But first of all, a good value selling person can understand the very different drivers of his buying group.
Okay, next question. What is the best way or best practices to define the needs of a customer? Is there a standard process that you use?
Yeah, what we would normally suggest is because the customer's customer approach. So try to understand the end market of your customer. Because normally, if you are in B2B, your customer is still only in the middle. He's not the end customer, he's not the ultimate customer. So what we are trying to do in a systematic manner to develop the end customer understanding, and from there develop the economical drivers of our customers and then come to our product. So from the end to our product. So we go backwards.
Can you give an example of that, Christian? I think I can follow
automotive.
Like on-time delivery probably would be one, right?
This was the example I just gave, that sooner or later the automotive's OEM would require from their supplier a so-called carbon footprint audit. I mean, that was obviously, it's coming now, some do it already. So carbon footprint audit means how much energy, not just is your product using, but is your entire factory using, so on and so on. And then we went back, okay, why now? And you are now a third-tier supplier. You deliver components only. And then we went back, how is your footprint? And then we developed our value message based on energy.
Great.
It's a passion of detail work.
Okay, last question regarding role playing in sales. What are some best practices that you've seen with respect to role playing sales situations?
I would think, first of all, role plays can be only done with real cases. You cannot ask a trainer or someone to make a role play up. It must always be real cases, either things which are going to happen, which is the most effective one, or which has happened. So what we are normally doing is we play kind of devil advocates game. So we imagine maybe what is the next negotiation or the next whatever needs, unless we are going to do to perform. And then we define roles, good roles and advocates role and devil advocates role. And then we do a real role play. What the learning is that this kind of things can last only for about 20 or 30 minutes and people would be kind of exhausted anyhow. And then we do a reflection. So what is now our learning from this? We call it dry run. And then people learn it. And what is outstanding in terms of, I would say, experience is if you keep doing and iterating this with this team. This is what I said with one of our clients. We do this every 6 weeks. We iterate this learning, and the learning curve is tremendous.
Okay. There's a follow-up question to your customer's customer approach for needs assessment. So the question is, if I understand you correctly, business has to worry more about the customer's cost or revenue before considering your own business's sales or revenue. Please confirm if I understood this correctly.
That is absolutely certain. But imagine yourself, would you buy in a commercial, rational way something where you don't understand the commercial value for you? But maybe a side step to this, there are 4 value points which you have to figure out in this context. Most people normally think about only about cash, money, euros, dollar, currency. Yes, I mean, ideally you can calculate the benefit of your product in terms of cash and money. That is not always possible. Then at least it's time, especially in automotive, a lot about of text time. So if you can have the evidence that your machine is allowing a higher text time, that is always a benefit. The third, never forget about risk. You can also make the risk reduction a value point of your service, for example. Imagine that your company provides, I would say, a very dense service network. Then you can do a calculation based on risk. So in case of risk of downtime, our company is much better than the other companies because our service network is more dense. And then the fourth element, I mean, that's very careful to play, it's still the ego thing, especially when on your end customer side, you're dealing with family businesses, family-owned businesses. They do have a very strong ego. So you're better up in your value selling propositions to position also the ego part. So that's why when we do the analysis, we go normally for 4 different value points.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question here. So we talked about sales, Christian. How do we use and measure value selling in marketing?
I would say it's not a clear measurement. I mean, one thing, of course, is in terms of you can analyze your contact database. What I said before, you can calculate how many and what ranks of the customer organization we do have in our marketing database. You can analyze how specific the messages are you send to these people. And what you should not do, never ever, is to send generic messages out to senior people. They hate that. But you can measure how specific or how many specific let's say, campaigns you run by target audience. You can measure that. You can also take, and now this is more a judgment call than not really a measurement, you can take a close look at what we normally do, at the material our salespeople are going to use with customers. And the key point is, if you read through these documents, you need to be able to make commercial sense of your product. Most of the documents we see are truly feature driven. So they're feature here and feature there. And then you can really quantify, in a sense of quantify, how good marketing is in terms of value selling. How many of the documents translate a feature into a commercial value?
Great. Any final words before I wrap up the call, Christian?
Yeah, maybe I think, as you can see, my passion behind, I really think value selling is a philosophy. It's not a tool. It's a passion about creating customer value in every step you do. And my key point, I come back to my example with Michael, and that's, by the way, a true example, where the customer is willing to pay for your salesperson consulting him, then you are a top level value selling company.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we invite you to participate in upcoming webinars that we have scheduled. You can see where those are in two places, actually. So our LinkedIn company page, which our call sign is Lean Focus LLC. If you go to the events tab, you can see all of the scheduled webinars for the rest of 2022. You can also go to our webpage, leanfocus.com, and you can enroll directly there. Either option works for signing up for these webinars, and we do typically 1 to possibly 2 per month on topics like this and others. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your time today. Christian, thank you for taking time off your vacation to cover the topic of value selling, and I wish you all a great rest of your week. Take care and bye now.
Enjoy the day.